Imagine you are standing at the edge of a great puzzle where the pieces are shifting under your feet every single second. This is the world of global politics where the lives of millions depend on whether a few powerful people can agree on where those pieces belong. We are currently watching a moment in history that feels like a heavy door slowly creaking open after being locked for too long and painful years. It is a moment filled with a strange mix of hope and deep fear because we know how easily that door could slam shut again. We are looking at a conflict that has caused unspeakable suffering where the simple act of staying alive has become a daily struggle for countless families. Now there is a plan on the table, a 20-point plan that promises to stop the noise of the bombs and bring a quiet kind of peace. But in this world a plan is only as good as the trust behind it, and trust is the one thing that has been in shortest supply. To understand if this turning point is real, we have to look past the news headlines and see the invisible forces that are pulling the strings. We have to ask ourselves what happens when a powerful leader decides to flip the script and use every card in their hand to force a result. This is not just a story about two sides fighting over land, it is a story about global leverage and the messy reality of how peace is actually made in the modern age. On the surface, we see a simple movement toward a ceasefire and the release of hostages. We see leaders meeting in the Oval Office and plans being announced to the world. This is the surface concept of diplomacy where everyone smiles for the camera and says that they want the fighting to end. On this level, it looks like a standard negotiation where one side offers something and the other side accepts or asks for more. We see the pressure mounting on Hamas to say yes and the world waiting for a signal that the violence will stop. This surface view suggests that if we can just get the right words on a piece of paper, the war will be over. But global politics is rarely that simple. The surface is often a performance designed to show the public that progress is happening even when the real work is happening in dark rooms far away. If we only look at the surface, we might miss the fact that the players involved have very different goals. One leader might want a peace deal to win an election while another might be trying to stay out of jail. These personal motivations are the engine under the hood of the diplomatic car. Behind this search for peace, there is a hidden assumption that everyone at the table actually wants the same outcome. We assume that if a plan is good for the people on the ground, then the leaders will naturally want to sign it. But the hidden reality is often about power and survival. For a group like Hamas, the hidden assumption is that they have nothing left to lose. When you are a group facing total destruction, your incentives change. You might not care about a peace plan if you think it means the end of your organization. On the other side, we assume that a powerful country like Israel has total control over its own choices. But the hidden truth is that even the strongest nations are deeply dependent on their allies for intelligence and weapons. The hidden assumption that these leaders are acting purely out of national interest is often false. They are often acting out of a need to maintain their own personal influence. When we uncover these hidden layers, we realize that the peace deal is not just about stopping a war, it is about managing the egos and the fears of the people in charge. If we look at the structural pattern of this conflict, we see a repeating cycle of unilateral actions and late responses. For a long time, different sides have acted without asking for permission. They have launched strikes and made decisions as if they were alone in the world. But the structural pattern is shifting. We are now seeing a move toward what we call a technocratic governance model. This is a structure where outside powers like the Gulf states and the United States step in to manage the situation because the local leaders cannot agree. The pattern here is one of oversight and control. It is a model where security is provided by neighbors like Egypt and reconstruction is paid for by wealthy allies. The structural pattern shows us that peace in this region is no longer seen as something that the local parties can achieve by themselves. It is being treated like a bankrupt company that needs an outside manager to come in and fix the books. This is a pattern we have seen in other parts of the world, and it often leads to stability but at the cost of local people having a say in their own future. It is a model built on the idea that ending the war is more important than perfect governance. We can reframe this entire situation with a new perspective on the meaning of leverage. Instead of seeing leverage as a weapon used to hurt an enemy, we can see it as a tool used to push a friend. This is what we are seeing right now with the United States and Israel. The reframing here is that true friendship in global politics sometimes requires a public humiliation to force a change in direction. When a leader is forced to read an apology or change a long-term plan, it is a signal that the hierarchy of power has been reset. We can also reframe the idea of a state. Perhaps in the near term, a Palestinian state as we traditionally imagine it is not possible. If we reframe our goal from achieving a state to achieving survival and basic needs, the path forward becomes clearer. This perspective is difficult because it requires giving up on long-held dreams for the sake of immediate peace. It asks us to accept a halfway house where people are safe and fed even if they do not have a flag or a seat at the global table. This reframing is a pragmatic and often cold way of looking at the world, but it is the logic that is driving the current peace plan. We can apply these insights to our daily lives by looking at the small conflicts in our own worlds. Think about a disagreement you have with a neighbor or a coworker. Often we stay stuck because we are looking at the surface of the problem. We argue about the words said or the things done. But if we look for the hidden assumptions, we might find that the other person is acting out of a fear we did not know they had. Just as in global politics, we can use our own leverage to get to a yes. Sometimes that means offering a way for the other person to take the win so they do not feel humiliated. We can also apply the technocratic model to our own lives by bringing in a neutral third party to help us manage a situation that has become too emotional. We learn that peace often requires a loss of some sovereignty. To get along with others, we have to give up the right to always have our own way. We can see that the ability to forget an unworkable plan and move on to a new one is a vital skill for anyone trying to build a better future. The world of geopolitics is a mirror of our own human nature, just on a much larger and more dangerous scale. As we think more deeply about this, we must face the uncomfortable truth that peace is often unfair. The people who have suffered the most in this conflict, the families in Gaza who are facing starvation and the families of hostages waiting for news, are not the ones sitting at the table in the Oval Office. They are the ones living with the consequences of the choices made by people they may never meet. This realization brings a sense of gravity to the current negotiations. It reminds us that while the politicians play a game of chess, the pieces on the board are human lives. The current plan might be the best chance for survival, even if it is not a perfect solution for justice. The statistics show us the heavy cost of delay. In the region we are discussing, over 2 million people are living in conditions that are nearly impossible to bear. Since the conflict began, tens of thousands have lost their lives, including a high number of children and the elderly. When we look at these numbers, the technical details of a peace plan seem less important than the simple need to stop the clock on the killing. We are forced to ask if a peace without a state is better than a war with the promise of one. This is the heart of the dilemma. It is a choice between a difficult reality and a deadly dream. The world is watching to see if the leaders involved have the courage to choose the reality. If they do, it will not be because they have suddenly become kind or wise, but because the pressure from the outside has become greater than the pressure from within. Leverage is the only language that is understood in this high-stakes environment. If the current plan succeeds, it will be a victory for pragmatism over ideology. It will show that even the most bitter enemies can be moved when the person holding the cards is willing to play them. This is a cold and calculating view of the world, but it is the one that might actually save lives this week. As we wait for the next update, we are reminded that we are all part of this global system. The choices made in a distant capital affect the price of the oil in our cars and the safety of the world our children will inherit. We are not just spectators, we are stakeholders in a peace that is still being built piece by weary piece. If you were the one holding all the cards in a conflict where both sides felt they had lost everything, what is the first thing you would ask one side to give up to prove they were finally ready for peace?